communities. Our empirical findings are based on interviews that we had conducted with 10 South African women. We explore their lived experiences and also perceptions of platform misogyny. Their testimonies reveal the hidden hierarchies that shape these engagement markets and also the gendered harms that they produce. So we also explored how opaque AI-mediated engagement markets act as a mechanism through which hierarchical power systems hide their violence. And through a feminist theoretical lens, we analyzed fear, sexism, and exclusion as expressions of patriarchy. These expressions are often algorithmically amplified through engagement-driven design. The feminist lens that we employed helped us interpret how the architecture of digital platforms, from the algorithms to the content moderation systems, reproduce the broader social conditions of inequality and also domination. We argue that these gender oppressive engagement markets are not simply sites for misbehavior or isolated harassment, but rather constitute a systemic form of information disorder. Our findings show that the rise of information disorder campaigns, including disinformation, hate speech, and coordinated harassment, are enabled by these markets. Just to touch base, in terms of engagement markets, I'm referring to social media platforms. So these entail platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. Those types of platforms we generally go for sources of entertainment, communication, and just to stay up to date, I suppose, with global trends. And in this sense, we recognize that these engagement markets represent not only technological problems, but also deeply political and ethical challenges. And when they're left unregulated, these systems reinforce pre-existing inequalities and essentially legitimize the weaponization of digital spaces, particularly against women and other marginalized communities. So we recognize that the advent of generative AI has further complicated this terrain, forcing policymakers and regulators to re-examine the gender dynamics of information disorders. And while the causes of online gender-based violence are multifaceted, our research highlights that engagement markets play a central role in enabling the spread of coordinated gendered harm. We therefore sought to understand how opaque engagement markets and AI-mediated economies facilitate the creation and circulation of oppression, such as the spread of online gender-based violence. We interpret online gender-based violence not as an isolated digital issue, but as a symptom of deeply rooted gender inequalities, inequalities that are ingrained in our social, economic, and political structures. And I think that this conversation is incredibly timely, considering the current climate with regards to femicide in South Africa. So I think it's really wonderful that we are engaging on this topic during this particular period in time. I think that something else that we also examined was the phenomena of non-consensual intimate image distribution and the rise of what we term female fear factories. So we know that the proliferation of non-consensual intimate imagery is being enabled by tools that are increasingly accessible, inexpensive, and easy to use, such as generative AI. There's a long historical lineage of exploiting women's bodies for profit, visible in systems like human trafficking and the sex industry. What is new, however, is that generative AI is now allowing the broader public to participate in this exploitative, unprecedented, this exploitation with unprecedented ease. And once an image or video is uploaded, it moves beyond the uploader's control, spreading across the internet and reaching vast audiences. Our research found that content mills are stealing videos and images from real women on platforms such as Instagram, and then using generative AI to superimpose synthetic influencer faces onto these stolen bodies. And these synthetic influencer accounts are then monetized through subscription platforms like OnlyFans, which drives profit from non-consensual material. This representation This represents a triple violation, one of content theft, lack of consent, and also commercial exploitation. It also highlights how emerging AI capabilities are being weaponized to commit gender-based harms, and how platforms in action, particularly Instagram's lack of systemic intervention, has amplified the injustice against women whose autonomy and dignity are repeatedly violated. Um, and then when we consider the broader AI landscape in which online gender-based violence operates, one of the most visible manifestations is the so-called My PC Biospam, or PIB, which has been trending on X, formerly Twitter, since January 2024. And many users, particularly women, report that it has become virtually unavoidable. This spam not only clutters online spaces, but also demonstrates how women's digital content is routinely stolen and repurposed, often for pornographic or explicit material without their consent. And through this case, we see how women's digital personae are treated as public property, how AI-generated content collapses consent, and how algorithms actively amplify exploitative content because it generates clicks, shares, and engagement. These malicious attacks, digital attacks, are not random acts of trolling. They are performances of power, and they work to discipline and silence women in digital spaces by making participation itself a risk. We approach this through the concept of female fear factors, as I had mentioned previously, which describes how violence against women operates as a public theater of control. And in patriarchal societies, violence against women is not only tolerated, but also often performed as a way of signaling who is safe to violate, who belongs, and who must be kept in fear. The participants in our study articulated this fear very vividly, from the anxiety of posting online to the constant calculations about what might be too provocative, too political, or even too visible. These factors of fear are produced through things like algorithms, social, and also cultural mechanisms that essentially normalize misogyny, reproduce subordination, and also ultimately exclude women from full participation in digital life. I'll just share maybe a quote or two from the participants. So one of the participants had said that there are Instagram accounts known as leak accounts that purposefully post pornographic or inappropriate pictures of people without their consent, some purely dedicated for revenge. It's very difficult to get pictures removed from the site, and even if Instagram takes it down, they generally start a new account and repost all the pictures again. Another participant said that someone I did not know messaged me to be a sugar baby, offering money so that I could talk to them. And then a final quote is, because misogyny is so common, it is so easily overlooked. As women, we have been conditioned to overlook it to the point where it is really difficult to recognize it as violence. It is almost like we are desensitized to it, and I would say that it happens more frequently than I pay attention to. And then as we look to solutions, it is important to recognize that the convergence of anonymity, lack of consent, and also AI's generative capacities is fundamentally reshaping how media and human rights landscape. Policymakers need to urgently address the proliferation of non-consensual intimate images, as this emerging phenomenon threatens personal privacy, digital trust, and also online safety for all. Without strong regulatory guardrails and accountability mechanisms, predatory actors will continue to outpace any reactive measures, therefore normalizing the monetization of non-consensual sexual content. We call for a multi-stakeholder action, one that involves law enforcement, regulators, platform owners, and also civil society. This is needed to uphold human dignity and also restore agency over one's digital likeness. Some key recommendations that emerge from our research include stronger regulatory collaboration. So as I mentioned, We need regulators to work directly with platforms to create clear and efficient procedures for the submission and evaluation of removal requests for non-consensual content. This is where things like content or stricter content moderation policies could come into play. We need enforcement and accountability. So this is where compliance with these policies must be monitored and enforced with civil or criminal penalties for non-compliance. We need also things like legal reform. So governments need to update existing legal frameworks to provide victims of deepfakes and synthetic media abuse with clear pathways for legal recourse. And while entirely new laws may not always be necessary, existing laws around defamation, privacy, copyright, and consent need to be recognized as valuable instruments for digital justice and can certainly be leveraged. And then if you look at platform governance, platform companies need to adopt transparent AI governance and also gender responsive content moderation frameworks that account for the structural nature of online gender-based violence. And then finally, literacy is very key and instrumental in this issue. We need to really enhance our public awareness and education on this topic. As AI is developing, so are the harms and the risks, especially for marginalized groups and such as women and children. Therefore, strengthening digital literacy and public understanding of what entails AI-driven manipulation is extremely crucial in building resilience against disinformation and also gendered harms. So in closing, if we are to build a more just and equitable digital future, we need to move beyond framing online harms as individual experiences or content moderation challenges. These are systemic consequences of how our digital economies are designed, economies that reward outrage, invisible consent, and also commodify bodies and emotions alike. Research ICT Africa's ongoing work on digital ecosystems, data governance, and also policy reform urges us to imagine a different kind of digital order, one where justice, accountability, and also human dignity form the foundation of technological progress. I'll end there. Thank you so much.
That was very informative. And as a woman, as I sit here, I I have a question, a follow-up question that I want to ask that the marginalized, whilst these frameworks are being put in place, whilst the government or systems are being put, mechanisms are still being drafted so that we can have a better, safe online experience. What can individuals do? What practical steps can marginalized victims take right now to protect themselves online while the broader platform and the policy solutions are being developed?
Thank you so much for your question, Belinda. I think that some of our participants during the interviews had responded to this very question that I had posed to them, and they had said that in order to protect themselves, they take up sort of security measures to protect themselves, such as making their accounts private or limiting who they accept as friends on these social platforms. So not really accepting strangers and rather accepting people that they know. And then also avoiding to put up profile pictures of themselves. So rather than putting up pictures of their own faces or bodies, they would put up pictures of maybe animations or landscape or animals. So things that don't directly associate with the embodied data. These are just a few of the mechanisms that some of the vulnerable women that we had spoken to raised during the conversation. But it would be very interesting if we could open up the floor at some stage to the participants and hear what they have to say about these additional security measures that could be taken. Thank you.
100%. I think we will pose the question again after all the speakers have spoken so that we can understand from everybody else what we can do to protect ourselves whilst we are waiting for the systems to change and be in our favor. Moving to our next segment, we are going to be talking about content governance. And I would like to just introduce the topic before my colleague Tendai jumps in. And there's also Hlengi, where I'm not sure if you'd also want to input on this one. So when we talk about content governance, we are talking about the systems and the decisions that determine what is allowed online, how those decisions are made, and who is accountable for them. In other words, it's about the rules of the digital public square. Who writes them, who enforces them, and how fair or transparent they are. At the moment, most of these decisions are made by global technology companies outside of our borders and without much local oversight. Algorithms flag or remove content. Moderation teams follow company policies that may not fully understand our languages, our history, or our social realities. This can lead to inconsistent enforcement where harmful content stays up while legitimate voices, particularly those of activists or minority groups, are silenced. A rights-based approach to content governance means placing human principles, freedom of expression, equality, dignity, and participation at the center of the systems. It calls for transparency from local platforms and how moderation works, accountability for decisions that cause harm, and inclusivity in designing the rules that shape our online spaces. In South Africa, the conversation is especially important. Our society is diverse and multilingual, and our online environment reflects the same inequalities that exist offline. Effective governance here must take this very seriously. It must involve not only platforms, but also civil society, policymakers, and users themselves. So I'm going to ask Tendai to come now and speak on this in depth and share his views on content governance. Tendai, over to you.
Thank you, Belinda, and good morning to the colleagues and to the participants. And thank you for making time to discuss this important subject. And I'd just like to share some few thoughts on principles of content governance. And I believe that we all agree that this is increasingly becoming a central discussion or a central subject, particularly those who work in the democracy and human rights movement, civic engagement, civic participation, and it is central to how our nations grow democratically or strengthen the systems of governance. So it's becoming a subject that is intertwined and interlinked. Unfortunately, there's not so much that has been written on the area that is addressing or that is covering the emerging trends and challenges that are quite fast. The space is fast paced, and the scholarship is not matching that. And I do believe that we need to match that as academics, as researchers, legal scholars. We are uniquely positioned to make an impact in shaping the frameworks and that govern digital spaces, and also in shaping discussions, simplify the conversations, and help the masses understand, so that we stimulate conversations so that people are not just passive observers, but they become also active in creating an environment that is more inclusive, respecting human rights, and also respecting the norms and the rules of online engagement. So like Belinda, my colleague, has given a little bit of a description on what content governance is. And I'll just perhaps also add a little bit on why it matters in this particular discussion. Like Belinda had alluded, that it refers to the policies and systems and practices that determines how online content is created and moderated, and perhaps as well distributed. And for me, it matters because these systems and practices determines who gets to speak in a particular space, in a particular subject, in a particular issue, and who gets heard, and why these people who speak at that particular time gets heard, who gets to have influence, and who gets to get silenced. So it then becomes not only an issue of law, but it's an issue of politics. It's an issue of power. It's an issue of resources as well. So in the context of South Africa, like it has been alluded, it's a highly unequal society, like some of the societies that are highly unequal in the world. Those spaces then mirror power dynamics, they mirror deep social, political, and economic inequalities. They mirror the thinking amongst the people, they mirror the lives of people in general. So content governance then becomes things. It becomes about lives, becomes about exposing issues and why issues has to be exposed. And above all, it also becomes a human rights issue. So we see that our online spaces are generally can you hear me? I saw that the recording has stopped. Belinda, can you hear me?
Yes, Tendai, we can hear you. The recording
Okay.
stopped. I don't know why, but we
Can
can
hear
hear you.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So as we have seen that our spaces in terms of the content that is online, there is a lot of issues that are emerging, particularly online. Allow me to call them illegalities, like disinformation, misinformation, and so forth. Hate speech been exacerbated, and much of it's then it's mostly used in vernacular languages. It mirrors racial, political, and socio-economic issues that sometimes are not people generally don't talk about on daily basis because of their sensitivity. So then the use of local languages, indigenous languages and symbols to then share this content becomes then a tool, an effective tool for spreading such. For example, if you remember the July unrest of 2021 in KwaZulu-Natal, social media platforms were flooded with all kinds of content that it's fueled violence and looting. And if you remember also during COVID-19, at the beginning of COVID-19 case in South Africa, there was so much insensitivity around the disease, who gets to get infected, and also there was it was a racialized issue because of ignorance and so forth. So the content that was being spread, misleading content, mostly being used in the vernacular language and so forth, exploited or disturbed the agenda to actually keep people safe. It becomes then also a tool for distraction, and people were not safe, and some were found themselves getting infected, and as well as because of the content that the algorithms that were generated, because it became jokes, and these jokes they tend to then have serious repercussions. And even last week there were so many insensitivity around content that been shared online around the churches, a particular church, and the people and so forth, despite what was being spread, what had happened. I believe that the viral nature of such content had an impact on the perception around churches, and also the individuals, and also the intention of spreading content. These are things that are not regulated, and you could see that even social media platforms could not even stop the forwarding of such content. And in my view, it's also content that is not good for young people and so forth. So these are kind of issues that we are faced with, where we sometimes have content that is spreading viral, and this content online platforms cannot, in one way or the other, um, uh, disallow the spreading of such information, because at the end of the day, there's ethical and moral implications apart from it being unfavorable content to be shared. So then it becomes a human rights issue again. So the argument that I'm driving here is that at the heart of this, we need to, like Belinda alluded, there is a need of a human rights based approach, that moderation of content that is being spread online, and the algorithms and even if the human beings who are monitoring the content that is being shared online, must respect international and human rights standards, must respect the local laws, if any, and our laws must also evolve to match the digital space. It must also respect rights to freedom. I mean, our unit, we do a lot of work on freedom of expression, information. So we must respect that as well. And particularly, we see that content moderation needs to be centered on the notion of human dignity, to respect the human person. So that's one thing that it's central to human rights movement. And also the idea, you also see these things in elections, that if content moderation becomes central to participation in public life, sometimes if not addressed, you realize that the rights to participate in public life are not protected. And for example, most recent elections in South Africa, not only in South Africa, but as well in other countries, we've seen that, for example, when we talk about female candidates, participation in elections, so online harassment becomes used as a tool to decampaign, silence women, attacks, gendered slurs, threats of violence. Some, they even report that we're receiving threats that we're coming to attack your families and so forth. Attacks on personal lives. That is very critical in the context of Zimbabwe, where female candidates in participation in public life, they are attacked in private lives, particularly those who are not married. All sorts of stories are generated just to discredit them. And like in the context of South Africa, the same happens even at local level. We're getting into local governance in 2026. Communities discredit the vulnerable, including female candidates, based on kind of stories that are generated and so forth. And these are things that are shared online, and they are not removed online. They stay there online, then they become the truth to those who are not critical to look at these things in a very critical way. So such needs a human rights approach is very urgent in how we look at this, particularly in whether it's algorithms, it's human moderation, and so forth. So at regional and within the regional and international framework, that should perhaps provide inspiration in the governance of content governance. We have UN guiding principles at on business and human rights, for example. Uh, they speak about also a little bit of content governance, and even we can draw inspiration from the mother human rights declaration, the HUDHR itself, about certain rights that need to be protected. But we understand that the rights that are protected offline must be protected online as well. the Declaration on Internet Rights and Freedoms in Africa. I think or the formation of such and Agenda 2063 should just then give inspiration in terms of formulating norms or strengthening norms that at local level can address issues of content governance. As a Center for Human Rights, so we are collaborating with this UNESCO initiative on social media for peace, because it is becoming more critical that we cannot have peace when we don't address the social media project or the social media aspect of our life. Social media has become a bridge, whether it's for peace or for human rights, or a bridge for conflict, or anything you can think about, because it's a tool that we use on every second of our life to communicate message. So we believe that through this partnership and collaboration, we need to strengthen how rights that are protected offline should be protected online, and ensuring accountability of those who violate the rights that are protected online, the same rights that are being violated online. There should be accountability of such perpetrators. Perpetrators must face accountability, and that there is need to intensify a human rights-based approach in spreading awareness about the kind of content that we share on various online platforms. We need to intensify our discussions, dialogue on issues of content governance, and also to see how whatever content that we share, is shaping the life that we have now, and it's also shaping the life of future generation. So future generations must be protected at all costs. With the content that we have today, we have an impact with the generation that we have in the future. So the need for multi-stakeholder discussions regularly with its government, with its civil society, its academia, its church, its traditional leaders, leaving no one behind into this critical conversation, so that the issues or the respect for rights offline will also become the respect for the rights offline will be equated with the respect of the rights offline. So that's my quick remarks on the subject, and I hand over to you, Belinda, for further interrogation.
Thank you, Tendai, for that delivery. Following up to your discussion, I just want you to touch again on who influences the influencer, especially who shapes the decisions of the influencers themselves. I want us to talk about the biases of the platform owners, moderators, the algorithm designers, the effect of what they put out there, the content that gets amplified, suppressed, or monetized, and what the implications of that, what was the implication and what does it do to the marginalized voices?
Hmm. I think whether we like it or not, the question of who influences the influencers is those who have power and resources. It's whether in South Africa or it's in the United States or anywhere. So there's a lot of resources that are being put by those who have power, so that they can also and resources, so that they can maintain power and grip of resources, because they want to shape the narrative. So they will put the money. And you see it, for example, I give the recent example in Malawi, where we had social media influencers who were being paid lots of money by the governing party, so that they push a certain narrative, for example, during elections and so forth. So whether we like it or not, and also the thing is that we're also struggling and grappling with corruption, whether it's in South Africa or elsewhere. Human beings are corrupt or are inclined to corruption due to poverty and other things and other reasons, greed. So you realize that we have human beings who can be easily corrupted by money, and then they tend to influence the narrative. And so the question who influences the influencers, yeah. So it becomes also an issue of politics, because remember also, like even in the context of South Africa, now the energy and the focus is on what is happening in 2026 will shape the governance landscape in this country. For example, the outcome of the November, of course, the local government elections are scheduled for 4th of November. The outcome of the groupings that have emerged and those existing ones that are trying, for example, to consolidate power or to grow or to maintain grip, who influence the 2029 elections, for example, which is the issue of power and which shapes governance. So it's about resources, it's about strategy, it's a political issue of content, governance. It should not be looked outside politics. It's a political issue, it's a money issue, and it's an issue of corruption as well. Those are things that I could perhaps add.
All right. Thank you, Tendai. And thank you, Zara. I think before we open the platform to the floor, Zara, do you have any additions to your discussion? And if not, then we can open it up to a brief question and answer segment.
No, I don't have any additional remarks to make. I'm quite interested in hearing from the participants and looking forward to some questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think at this point we can now open up questions, take questions from the floor. Anyone who has a burning question to ask our presenters for the day. If not, then I'll do a random selection of can you contribute something? It might not be a question. Maybe you just want to contribute something to this topic. Everyone, we are all on social media platforms. We are receiving content in one way or the other. I'm sure it affects us in one way or the other. So, can we contribute to the discussion? Anybody? I will take it that we had a great conversation that didn't require any follow-up questions.
Maybe just to ask our colleagues if they have any comments. Michael, do you have any comments? You know, that this is your area of interest as well. And thank you, our manager, if you have any closing thoughts on the subject. And also perhaps to hear from our colleagues, from our participants. Ivy, do you have any thoughts? And I see our alumni, uh, Halima, do you want to share any insight from the conversation? Yeah, maybe there is nothing. Maybe I could give back to you, Belinda.
All right, thank you. Okay, I think there is a comment there. Greetings. I'm personally just grateful to have joined and learned from your submissions. Thank you, Matthew Kiamba. Okay, thank you, Zara, for coming through and contributing to this very relevant conversation, because this is something that you are dealing with on a daily basis. And whilst we all think that we know how to navigate ourselves around social media or online platforms, at some point we find ourselves in situations where we don't know how to get ourselves out of it. So learning these skills and trying to have this conversation so that all the relevant stakeholders can push to have changes that will affect the future generation in a positive way. I think we need to consistently do this so that we shape how we want the world to be, especially online. So thank you so much for taking time and coming out to have this conversation with us. And Tendai, thank you for the segment on content governance. Thank you for your submissions. We are going to have another segment next week, a follow-up of this segment. So please do join us in our next segment. We will post the relevant information in due course. If there is nothing else from my side, this is goodbye from me. Tendai, you can add your submissions before we close.
Thank you so much, Belinda, and thank you to the team for making time. I think UNESCO is trying, with our partnership with UNESCO, so it tries to align the discussion within the purview of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, on, for example, on gender equality, on peace and justice, and strong institutions. Just to mention that, let us look at the discussion of today within the context of SDGs, particularly those relating to equality, strong institutions, peace and justice. And then I think we can also then do justice to see where we are and what needs to be done to arrive to the achievement of our SDGs. And that is all from me. And I thank you. I sincerely thank you from the bottom of my heart for us to have this important discussion. I don't know, Zara, do you have anything, or you are good?
Yeah, I think it's really great that you refer to the SDGs. I think one that you missed out is gender, um, which is of course very important and critical to the conversation that we've had today. But yeah, I think it was a really insightful conversation, and yes, I appreciate being here, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Zara. And goodbye, everyone. See you next